Without further ado, Ms. Mossi.
Well, welcome. Buenas noches. I'd like to welcome everybody to the DC Latino Caucus Independent at-Large Latino Candidates Forum. My name is Gabriela Mossi, and I'm the president of the caucus. So to start, the first thing I want to do is to welcome our very special guest moderator, Mr. Alejandro Negron. Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you
for joining us tonight. Alejandro is well known as the host of the bilingual radio show La Agenda Radio on 94.3 FM and 950 AM. And we are truly privileged to have him with us. So thanks. Now, as some of you know, there are 2 DC Council at-Large seats at stake in the upcoming election. But we have 24 candidates running for those 2 seats. And that includes 1 incumbent, and he is Mr. Robert White. Now, the caucus is committed to educating voters. It's also committed to supporting Latino candidates for public office. But we are an affiliate member of the DC Democratic State Committee. So we also endorse and support Democratic candidates on the ballot. So first, I want to let you know that the DC Latino Caucus endorsed Council Member White in April. He is a Democrat on the ballot for those 2 available seats. Now, we have a very, very unique year, since for the very first time, we have 5 independent candidates that are Latino or Latina. So while we will not be endorsing this evening, we are very proud to have all of you 5 candidates here with us. We want our members, we want our audience to get to know all of these distinguished candidates. So we hope that one of these 5 will go on to be elected as the District of Columbia's first ever Latino or Latina council member. Again, so I just want to welcome all of you, and I hope that you find this event informative. And I'm going to pass this on to our Vice President and Counsel, Joe Barrios. He is going to introduce the candidates, and he is also going to explain the rules for tonight's forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. It is my privilege and distinction to, at this time, welcome the 5 candidates that are going to be participating in this forum, the 5 Latino candidates running in a historic election for the independent at-large DC Council race. Those candidates are in alphabetical order: Ms. Claudia Barragan, Mr. Mario Cristaldo, Mr. Franklin Garcia, Mr. Alexander Padro, and Ms. Monica Palacio. I also want to extend my own thanks to our special guest moderator, Alejandro Negron, and I share Ms. Mossi's excitement in having you join us tonight. Our timekeeper tonight is Ms. Pamela Gomez. We will be taking, as time allows, questions from our audience, and our facilitator for that will be DCLC board member Luz Martinez, and our IT support is being done tonight by our volunteer and DC Latino Caucus member, Mr. Eddie Crystal. In terms of our rules this evening, number 1, first and foremost, this is a public meeting and it is being recorded. Your presence means that you agree to be part of a recorded proceeding that will be made available on our social media and our website. So if you do not agree with being recorded, this is your time to please leave now. Each candidate will be able to make an opening statement about their candidacy. That opening statement will be 1 minute for each candidate, and we will go in alphabetical order. So Ms. Barragan will open the forum tonight. We will have 8 questions, and each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. And each question will start with the next candidate down the list in alphabetical order. So the first question will be directed to Mr. Cristaldo, and the second will start with Mr. Garcia, and so on down the list. There will be no follow-up question, and each question will cover its own topic. As time allows, we may also accept questions from the audience, and if we do, each candidate will be permitted 30 seconds to respond. Finally, we will get to closing statements, and those will return to alphabetical order. Each candidate will have 2 minutes. Our timekeeper will have her video pointed to a timer to help candidates see how they are doing on time. So please use that as a guide. And when needed, she will announce that your time has expired. Candidates, please conclude your comments either before the timer expires or when she calls time. Candidates also please be courteous and allow each candidate to respond without interruptions. This is not a debate. Zoom doesn't really allow for that. Given the technology, it's a forum, so we do encourage you to focus on introducing yourself and your ideas and your policy platform. There will be no rebuttal time, but you can use your assigned time any way you like. Audience members, as we indicated at the beginning, please keep your web camera off at all times to keep the focus on the candidates and our guest moderator. Please also remain on mute at all times. If you have a question you would like to ask our candidates, please post it in the chat section on either Zoom or Facebook Live, and Ms. Martinez will select from audience questions as time allows. With that, I will turn it over to our guest moderator, Mr. Negron.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joe Barrios. Thank you, Gabriela Mosi, for the invitation. And thank you all who are listening or watching on Facebook Live. If you're connected on Zoom, thank you so much for taking time to be part of this. It's a very important time to be alive in this planet and to be a Latino in this country and in this city. Today, we hope to hear from all these candidates and get to know them a little bit better. You all heard the rules of the game, so we'll start with a opening statement, which I believe Ms. Barragan will start. Ms. Barragan will start. This is a Latino forum, so let's speak Spanish, right? Mrs. Barragan, please continue.
Muchísimas gracias. Ya tengo que cambiar mi apellido siempre con los americanos y es una oportunidad grande que puedan decir mi nombre bien. Muchísimas gracias. Mi nombre es Claudia Barragán, soy de Bolivia, soy Aymara. So I'm running, I'm going to say it in English because this is an English organization. I'm running for an at-large council seat, and I have been in DC for since 1987 when I migrated to the United States. So my immigrant experience is here in DC. I know what it's like to be an ESL student here. I know what it's like to struggle here. I know what it's like to be low income here. I am an elected ANC as well. I'm also a former policy staff member for Councilmember Trayon White. And I have been a public servant for over 2 decades. I show actions, not promises. And in a decade, I can actually, with only being there 2 years, but all of the other work that I've done, I have over 40 bills that I have introduced as a Latina. And that's
your time. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll continue with Mr. Cristaldo.
Please take yourself off mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. My name is Mario Cristaldo, and this time I'm running for DC Council at large. And I've been in DC since 1994. And when I came to the city, I came like everybody else as a young professional trying to change the world and working in issues related to environmental issues and human rights issues related to Latin American affairs. After a while, I started out working as a community organizer in living wages and also affordable housing. And that's how I fell in love with the city. I got married here and I became a homeowner, and I started working with the community, volunteering and doing other activities. And I believe that the great majority of the DC residents
Okay, sir, your time has expired.
Thank you. I'll be ready for the next round. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Cristaldo. We'll continue with Mr. Garcia.
Right. Thank you so much. And thank you for hosting. We had an opportunity to hear from some of the Latinos earlier a couple of months ago, and now we're doing this again. We should also do one in Spanish. Así que buenas noches a todos. A founding member of the caucus, very excited to be able to have so many Latinos actually running. Not so clear it's a good thing necessarily, but hopefully, as Gabriela said, one of us will make it. So I've been in Washington for over 40 years, advocating with all communities. A lot of you all know me. I've been working at the caucus, ensuring that Latinos have a voice here. I went to the Democratic Party, where I chair communications, and subsequently became one of the executive committee member to ensure that more Latinos come on board. Currently, I'm your U.S. representative in Congress to ensure that we have statehood for D.C., something that is very dear to most Washingtonian. So very much looking forward to a robust discussion about the issues that we care in our community, and hopefully it would be something that we can all appreciate. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Franklin Garcia. Mr. Padro, you're next.
Buenas noches.
Buenas
I'm
noches.
Alex Padro, and I am a 20-year ANC commissioner representing the Shaw neighborhood, which makes me the longest serving Latino elected official in Washington, D.C. I'm the son of Puerto Rican and Dominican parents, and would give me a great pride to represent for the first time D.C. Latino community on the D.C. Council. I would also be the first LGBT representative in a long time. I've been focused on rebuilding our neighborhoods. So my slogan is dreams come true, because I want to help to make all DC neighborhoods dreams come true. Many parts of the city have not had the kind of development that I've been able to spearhead in the Shaw neighborhood. I've been able to attract and support $3.5 billion worth of public and private investment. And we've been able to do that without displacing longtime residents, especially people of color. It can be done. I've done it in Shaw. I'd like to help other DC neighborhoods achieve their dreams. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Padro. And we'll conclude our opening statements with Ms. Palacio. Ms. Palacio, welcome.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Evening, everyone. This is Monica Palacio. It's great to be with you. Quickly, because we only have 1 minute, I'm a civil rights lawyer. I'm an advocate, a community organizer. I'm a mother, and I've served in the DC government for 8.5 years. I'm originally from Colombia, South America. Some of you know my story. I came to the US very young, and I moved to DC in 1990 to go to law school, which I became the first lawyer in my family. And I immediately started serving DC residents in 1992, working with incarcerated parents and children affected by violence. I believe I bring a unique experience to the candidates who are running, and I'm the most qualified to serve on the council because of my government experience. I served under 2 mayors, Mayor Vincent Gray, Mayor Muriel Bowser, and I have managed and successfully grown a district agency over 6 years. So I look forward to discussing the questions tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we're going to start with our questions. Our first question is, given the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on the Latino community, and as a member of the DC City Council, what would your strategic priorities be in supporting our community during this pandemic? And we'll start with Mr. Cristaldo. Mr. Cristaldo?
Yes, thank you. I believe that one of the main issues that we need to focus in is in our DC budget. As you know, the DC government has a $16 billion budget, and the Latino community doesn't really benefit much of it. As a matter of fact, some of the issues that came out during this time at City Council, at one point the council needed to pass a piece of legislation to help immigrants, workers who are not working right now, but they wouldn't be able to do it because we don't have any representation in the council. So if elected, I want to make sure that we focus on the money and the things that we need to do to help our community. Thank you.
Very well. We'll continue with Mr. Garcia. The question is, if you just tuned in via Facebook, given the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on the Latino community, as a member of the City Council, what would your strategic priorities be in supporting our community during this pandemic? And we'll continue with Mr. Franklin Garcia.
Thank you. And I will concentrate in our economy. This is what I'm hearing. We need to ensure that we have a vibrant economy that provides jobs. And when I talk about jobs, we need to make sure that our community is first in line to get those jobs, because for much too often, we know that in city government, for example, we have a lot of good paying jobs that provide a living wage to people. And we need to ensure that our community is included. Affordable housing is something dear to my heart. I'm a landlord owner. And so right now, half of my tenants are not able to afford paying rent. And so we need to ensure that we keep people in place. Public safety is a major issue right now. We need to ensure that our community is part of the discussion of public safety. The police officers, they need to represent our community. Currently, they're not. And education for us, that's dear, very important. It's what drove me away from the city, the lack of a good education. We need to ensure that education is good for all kids. So I'll be looking forward to being a champion for all these issues on the City Council.
And now we'll hear from Mr. Padro on the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on the Latino community in DC.
Because so many of our essential workers are Latino, the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on our small businesses, which employ so many of those essential workers, is going to be critical, because without shoring up those businesses, we're looking at somewhere between 50 and 70% of all those jobs disappearing within a year's time. So I actually have a proposal related to helping businesses be able to survive COVID-19. But equally important is making sure that we continue making progress on affordable housing. That's the #1 issue that everyone citywide has been telling me that they'd like to see me focus on if I've been so successful as to be elected. We're spending a lot of money on affordable housing. We're not spending it very wisely. We're not getting the number of units that we should. And then lastly, in order to be able to help maintain the pipeline of new businesses that can employ our essential workers, providing additional support for new businesses in parts of the city that have not yet seen revitalization. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Palacio.
Yes, so my priorities are to protect and enforce the laws that protect the Latino community and all immigrants in the city. As director of the Office of Human Rights for 6.5 years, 70% of the cases involving discrimination that we investigated were against workers. And I think that Latino workers are some of our most vulnerable and invisible workers in the city. They have been continuing to work in essential jobs on the front line: construction, grocery stores, restaurants, and many of them, and health workers. And what I'm hearing is that they need more resources to protect themselves, protect their families. So one of my #1 priorities is going to be continuing the work I've already done for many years, protecting workers. Along those lines, we need to help Latino families pay their rent so they don't get evicted. Affordable housing is a long-term need, but we have a crisis coming soon, and we have to protect families from ending up on the street.
And thank you so much, Ms. Palacio. We'll finish off this first round of questions, or this first question, with Ms. Barragan.
Gracias. So I want to make sure that we understand that we have to be in touch with the community. I feel like a lot of the candidates are not as in touch. Virtual learning is really critical right now. I've been talking to a lot of parents, and because we have a broken language access system and compliance and enforcement at schools right now, most of our students are falling way behind. And we could have addressed that 2 years ago with funding language access, but that never happened. And there was never any support from the government on that area. Employment protections are really important as well, because we are the essential workers. So we need to ensure that our health as essential workers are protected. So that's important. My husband is an essential worker, for example. And I think eviction relief, we need to be very targeted. There are Latinos in public housing right now that need our help. We never talk about them. We always talk about other people, but they're actually in public housing, and they're facing huge issues because they're low income And also they're disabled. Many of them are disabled, and families are really struggling. So I've been working with public housing.
Thank you, your time.
All right, thank you so much. And we will be discussing housing next. In our next question, we'll start with Mr. Garcia. COVID-19 has exposed specific issues around affordable housing. The District of Columbia claims it's committed to affordable housing and homelessness prevention, but evictions loom and are even illegally taking place. What's your response to this crisis? And where do you think we need to make changes or increase resources to help handle the issue?
Well, and this is particularly true for our community. And so we need to ensure that we do all we can to keep our community in place. I think that as we look for more funding, we need to look at all places. Nothing is off the table. We need to ensure that we prioritize what we do in government. So if we have any agency waste, we need to look at that. We need to reevaluate capital projects like the Macmillan development. We can put that on hold. The streetcars funding, that can be put on hold. So we need to think about all these different things that we can put on hold so that we can concentrate on the one thing that our community needs, which is housing right now and jobs. And so I'll be looking forward to being a champion for our community to ensure that our community stays in place.
We're talking about housing. Mr. Padro is next. Please answer our question. If you just tuned in, let me just repeat the question for the benefit of the audience. COVID-19 has exposed specific issues around affordable housing. The District of Columbia claims it's committed to affordable housing and homelessness prevention, but evictions loom and are even illegally taking place. What's your response to this crisis? And where do you think we could make changes or increase resources to help handle the issue? Mr. Padre.
So one of the critical issues that always comes up in terms of ensuring tenants' rights is that they are receiving information about those rights in the language that they speak. And I've helped a number of tenants associations over the years to be able to maneuver through the tenant right to purchase process to protect those rights. And I've always been very frustrated by the fact that the DC government doesn't have all of the documents that it should have available in Spanish. It doesn't have everything, all of the outreach services that should be available in Spanish as well. So we need to make sure that there isn't a language gap that inadvertently causes additional evictions. We need to extend the current moratorium on evictions. And yes, I would support withdrawing funding from some projects like the streetcar and Macmillan to help to provide additional immediate funding to prevent evictions citywide.
Thank you so much. And we'll continue with Ms. Palacio.
Yes, thank you. So I think that we need to put pressure on the entire government to create and extend a moratorium on evictions. The last thing I want to see, and I've talked to many families who are living in terror of this reality, is our Latino families and individuals getting kicked out on the street because they can't pay rent. So we must extend the moratorium on evictions. We need a more aggressive rent control program. So I fully support legislation that will protect tenants in their apartments so they don't lose their apartments because of exorbitant rate increases. And I think that we have to overhaul our emergency housing assistance. What I've heard and seen is that too many times families are put into these temporary programs, but they end up in a cycle of homelessness and unstable and becoming housing insecure. So we need to reform those programs so we really help families get into permanent affordable housing.
You may hear a couple of dogs. Those are my dogs. Excuse me. All right. Let's continue with Mrs. Barragan.
Perfect. So I like to be very specific, especially about the question. So as I was mentioning, I work with public housing tenants. One of the big issues that they have is that they don't understand their agreements. They don't understand the processes. They don't even understand the DC Housing Authority are the ones who are managing their agreements. They don't understand Section 8. There's so many issues, and I have been working for the last 4 years with DC Housing Authority to ensure that language access is in place. And I've actually been helping every single family that I encounter. I also want to talk about really quickly about the agreements, rental agreements. The rental agreements for our families, sometimes they're not even in the lease. That's a huge issue to resolve. If we resolve that issue, then we'll start resolving more, we'll be able to provide more relief. Virginia just passed a really good law that reconciles landlords and tenants together to work together collaboratively so that the funds are used among a share between them. I think that's really important. That will make everything.
Thank you. Time.
And that will
Time. Thank
make
you.
it easier for all of us.
Time.
Again,
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Let's continue with Mr. Cristaldo. Mr. Cristaldo?
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate the question. I'm actually, because of my background, I've done a lot of affordable housing projects for over 10 years here in DC. But as a council member, we have two ways of having a positive impact in our Latino community. One way is through the budget, and the other way is through policy making. So I think the reclaiming rent control and amending all the laws that we already have is going to be very important, since more than half of our Latinos in the district are renters. So also, we need to, as a city, refocus our vision of the need of affordable housing and make sure that we need 36,000 of new affordable housing units by 2030. And that's one of the things.
Thank you. Time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cristaldo. We'll continue with the next topic, which is the Black Lives Matter protests. DC has recently been in the news during the Black Lives Matter protests over police reform. The council has recently impaneled a police reform task force. What are the key issues specific to Latinos that you believe need to be addressed by the task force? And we'll start with Mr. Padro.
So when at the beginning of the century, I served on the biased policing task force that then Chief Ramsey had impaneled, because you'll remember, those of you that were in DC at the time, that we were having a huge number of stops on the street for nothing except walking or driving while Latino. We've come a long way, but we still need to see further reforms. Specific to the legislation, we need to look at additional opportunities to bring services that can help to prevent interactions of Latino youth with the judicial system, to give them additional job opportunities to avoid potential incarceration. And also we need to encourage more Latino officers to live in the District of Columbia, because I have found that the best police officers are the ones that actually live in our community. Thank you.
Very well. We're talking about police reform. That was Mr. Padro. We'll continue with Mrs. Palacio.
Yes, thank you. I think that the Black Lives Matter movement has opened the door to really important conversations around race, racism, and also racial justice in our city. And I think that policing for Washington, D.C., while many people say we don't face issues as bad as other cities, we could. And I think we need to be proactive in making sure that our Latino residents and our immigrant residents know their rights. They have access to 911, 311 resources in their languages, and also that we do a better job as we think about reforming the Metropolitan Police Department to make sure that every police officer understands that they are not acting on behalf of federal agents, and they're not enforcing federal policy, so that Latinos feel safe calling 911, walking down the street, asking for help if they need help. And I think that's still a challenge in our city. But most of all, we need to inform our residents about where to go for help and where to get help if they're in a crisis.
Very well. We're talking police reform and the Police Reform Task Force. We'll continue with Ms. Barragan.
So the police task force, have you guys noticed that there's no Afro-Latinos in that particular task force? And the one Latina that's in that task force, I have never seen her on the streets, and I've been on the streets the last 10 years for sure. So we need to have more representation that's from the community. I also would love to be able to talk about Afro-Latinos and how they're being targeted. That's a huge issue. And right now we have 5 candidates and none of us are Afro-Latinos, and we're not even bringing that up. The minute that they see us with power and that they see Afro-Latinos and immigrants, brown immigrants, because it's not just Latinos, colorism is a huge issue when it comes down to policing. I know that a brown Latina will get hit, will get stopped more than a white Latina, that's for sure. So we need to make sure that we're addressing these issues and definitely defund the police. I think I'm one of the few candidates here that believes in defunding the police. And specifically, I've read all of the lines. IT funds need to be reduced. Yep.
Very well. We're talking police reform. The council has recently impaneled a police reform task force. What are the key issues specific to Latinos that you believe need to be addressed by the task force? We'll hear from Mr. Cristaldo now. Mr. Cristaldo. I believe you're on mute, and now we can hear you.
Thank you for the question. I also believe that creating the task force by the council is in the right direction, and we need the task force to work with us and with the community, as a matter of fact, to be able to come with a comprehensive plan of how we change what the Metropolitan Police Department is now to we want it to be. And I believe that most of us believe that we need a community policing approach instead of a militarized police force here in the District of Columbia. So I welcome the opportunity, and I think one of the main things that we need to do is recalculate the budget of the Metropolitan Police Department, and also increasing the community organizers working in our communities instead of.
Thank you. Time.
Thank you.
Mr. Cristaldo, thank you. Mr. Garcia.
Yes, thank you. And Claudia hit on a very important issue, and that is that the task force is not representative of the community. But at any rate, that what I like to see them address is that we have more bilingual officers, that we have sensitivity training, more engagement with the community. Ultimately, it has to be we have to ensure that we increase the trust between the community and the police officers. We don't want to go back to the time during the riots of the 90s. We want to ensure that that changes. But at any rate, reimagining police has basically 3 steps, in my opinion. First, we need to ensure that the police force represents the community. Then we need to look at internal processes to ensure that we're not compensating officers for tickets, but for community engagement. And lastly, we need to ensure accountability is in place. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garcia. And we'll continue. Our next topic is education, and we'll start with Ms. Palacio. You may answer this question first. The question is, after years of educational reform and multiple short-term public school chancellors, the city's educational system is still unequal with respect to both resources and outcomes. What do you believe will be the best way to handle these inequalities and achieve a first-class education for Latinos and other DC students?
Well, as part of my platform, I think we need to bring, as I said, a racial equity lens to any investments we make in education. So number one, we have to prioritize investments in schools that have historically been struggling or neglected. Schools where families and communities have more needs. And instead of directing families to run across the district government to get services, we need to bring those services to the schools and make it easier for families to access services. The school is one of the few places where I think every family who has a child has to plug in for services. So that's one thing I would do. And in speaking to school leaders now for many years, we need more equity. We need more Black and brown leadership in schools. We need more community stakeholders that have a voice, organizations like PAVE. And we need to make sure that we don't leave any children behind, whether they're designated as at risk or if they have special needs.
Thank you.
We'll continue with Ms. Barragan. The topic is education.
Yes. So I get asked this question a lot as far as charter schools versus public schools. And I'll just go ahead and say it. we really need to empower public schools. Most of our immigrant students first attend public schools. And right now, our parents are being stretched by all limbs because of gentrification and because of charter school greed. Right now, parents live in Ward 7 and they have 3 kids that go through 3 different schools. Some of them are public schools, some of them are charter schools. If they want to go get health services from one school or food from another school, they can't do that because they don't drive. They can't communicate with the schools. They're right now, the current system is so inequitable that they're hurting our parents. The other thing is that these organizations like PAVE and other people, they're speaking on behalf of parents. We need to bring up the voice of the parents directly. That's what we should be doing. And we also need to make sure that that there's a PTO. We need a Latino PTO. I'm already starting it. It's gonna happen in the next 2 days. So we're moving forward. We're not waiting.
Thank you. Time.
Save us.
All right, thank you so much. The question is, after years of educational reform and multiple short-term public school chancellors, the city's educational system is still unequal with respect with both resources and outcomes. What do you believe will be the best way to handle these inequalities and achieve a first-class education for Latino and other DC students? We'll continue with Mr. Cristaldo. Mr. Cristaldo.
Thank you. If you look at the public school system in the District of Columbia as it is right now, half of our students are in the public schools and half of the other students in public schools are in the charter schools. So the part that is made of the public schools system, half of them don't finish high school. We're in a crisis in terms of educating our children and our youth, Latino children and youth in the District of Columbia. I think it's time for us to create all the community-based organizations working together with the administration of the public school system and the DC government and the leadership from the city council, from a Latino elected member of the council, to be able to work with us and to make sure that our kids have the highest education possible in the District of Columbia.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Cristaldo. We'll continue with Franklin Garcia. Franklin.
Yes, hi. A poor education is exactly what drove me away from the city and seek an education someplace else back in the 80s. And we need to ensure that that doesn't happen anymore. I do believe in school choice, but we have to ultimately ensure that our school, our neighborhood schools are first class. It's embarrassing that we should be talking about school system in the nation's capital as being one of the worst when we pay on average or nearly $30,000 per student. That has to change. And I think the first step in doing that is we need to strengthen a school board. We cannot have a school board that does not have the strength to empower. It's a lot better to have 9, 10, 12, whatever number you want to have on the school board to empower them to deal with our crisis than to have one mayor deal with this situation. So I am in support that we empower the school board to deal with this crisis that we currently have and ensure that our kids all have decent public education.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garcia. We'll continue with Mr. Padro. We're talking about education or educational reform.
So, some would say that the jury is still out on mayoral control of our schools. I would say that that the verdict is in and that it needs to end. We need to revert to the all-elected school board that actually makes all of the decisions for our school system. The reality is that today, transparency is a joke. Parents, teachers, students, the community have no real ability to engage in dialogue with DCPS, with the Deputy Mayor for Education, or the mayor on education issues. So we need to have fully empowered Board of Education, including a very diverse set of elected members to be able to make progress on the issues that we're talking about, disparities in funding, ultimately our main problem right now is mayoral control of the schools.
Very well. And we'll continue now talking about jobs in our fifth round of answers. Amazon announced its second headquarters last year right across the river in Arlington. Its presence will draw other companies to the area and will spawn many new high-paying jobs. At the same time, it will worsen economic inequality, gentrification, and displacement in our city. As a DC Council member, what is your plan to ensure that vulnerable communities, including Latinos, share in the wealth and opportunity provided by the district's rapidly growing information economy? Ms. Barragan, you're first.
So what did I already do? That's the best question. The comp plan. So I single-handedly added equitable development, which specifically addresses fairness and choice for everyone in the city, but specifically for those communities that have vastly been impacted by gentrification and displacement. Not only did I do a lot of the work in the comprehensive plan by myself. No other candidate here was helping me in that. I also wrote four different bills addressing displacement, addressing community land trust, addressing employment displacement. So all of these issues are all surround what we have known for a while. There is a plan to get us out of the city, and we have a right to the city. Housing is a human right, and we need to start thinking that way. And all of us need to do stuff. We can't just continue to promise that we're going to do things. Show that you've done something.
Very well. Mr. Cristaldo, you're next.
Gentrification has been a big issue, as we all know, here in the District of Columbia, and the fact that Amazon came in and offered high paid job opportunities is remarkable, because they exacerbated the issue of gentrification, pushing our people out. So we really need to focus on homeownership opportunities for Latinos, for example. One thing that I've done for more than 10 years here in the District of Columbia, that would help Latinos stay in the District of Columbia as opposed to be in this place. Of course, they can be done right now through the DC budget, because there is money there and there is the opportunity for working with our Latino families to get ready for homeownership. So that's one of the many things that we can do for our community at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cristaldo. We're talking economic inequality, gentrification, displacement in the context of DC's growing information economy. We'll continue with Mr. Garcia.
Yes, and thank you so much for that question. And I think that ultimately what we need to talk about is training. We need to ensure that our Latino population is well trained, vocational training. I was on the board United Planning Organization, and we had a program there that allowed many of our community people to be trained. And shortly after they were trained, they were promised a job. And that's exactly what we need. The one challenge we have is that our community has a lot of undocumented people, and they are not able to be to participate in those programs. So we want to make sure that when we have any city-funded programs, that we include everybody, and that we don't ask anybody for their immigration status, something that is lacking right now. So we need to ensure that we enforce our laws when we don't ask anybody for their documentation. So training, vocational training, that's how we get our people ready. If you don't have the skills, you can't get those jobs. That's how it goes.
Very well, Mr. Padro.
In addition to job training to ensure that our people are able to get those high-paying jobs, we also need to reform the Certified Business Enterprise program. The CBE program has the potential to ensure that small independent contractors, especially those that are minorities, are able to access contracts that are being led by the district government, but also by the private sector. It's a program that, when it works well, it can be very effective. Unfortunately, it's had fits and starts, and it's in need of reform. So I would say that ensuring that the CEBE program allows greater access to Latino contractors would be a great step towards increasing the opportunity of jobs and capturing those dollars that Amazon and other big investors are bringing into our region.
All right, very good. We're talking about the district's rapidly growing information economy, specifically how it affects economic inequality, gentrification, and displacement. Our last speaker will be Ms. Palacio.
Yes, thank you. So something that I bring to the table that I want to keep sharing is that at the Office of Human Rights, where I was the director for 6.5 years, the agency doubled while I was there. It grew enormously. The number of cases we investigated grew enormously. And that was because Latinos and many families, many groups across the city felt safe coming to ask for help at a government agency. So I think in order to protect Latinos and immigrants from working, from discrimination, from being pushed out of jobs, from being pushed out of an apartment that they want to rent or a home that they want to buy, we have to have aggressive government programs that they know they can access. And I bring that enforcement experience. I like to say that I bring X-ray vision into the workings of 70 government agencies because I spent almost 8.5 years inside the government, finding out how things work and also finding out how they don't work, and holding directors, managers, program directors, and
Thank you.
customer service
Time.
accountable.
Thank you so much, Ms. Palacio. Let's change topics. There are 5 of you running for the DC Council that could potentially split the Latino vote and prevent any of you from being elected. Why should every other member of this panel drop out and support your candidacy to unite the Latino vote? And we'll start with Mr. Cristaldo.
This is actually an unfair question to every single candidate, but regardless,
it had to be made.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, the issue of being a candidate is not an easy task, and I actually applaud all the candidates that were here today, because it takes a personal decision plus a community involvement to do all this. You know, the more we're engaged in the political process, the better. And I welcome everybody in this process. We come from different backgrounds. We have different views. Some of us are more or less more progressive than others. So people have the spectrum of the great Latino community that we have here, the variety of the people, the different voices, and I think we should vote for 2 of them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Franklin Garcia will get your answer to that question right now.
Sure. Yeah. To me, that's actually an easy question. I have been in the city for over 40 years. I have a graduate degree from American University, an undergraduate from GW. I have over 20 years worth of experience in high management in IT. I have experience working in finance. I have, as the highest elected Latino in the city, everybody knows me. I've worked with the LGBT community, with the African-American community, the Asian Pacific Islander community. Everybody in the city pretty much knows my work. I headed communications for our Democratic Party, where I was able to bring a lot of Latino representation. And so I think it's a matter of who do you have that can actually bring it home? I think I have an opportunity. And if we had a higher Latino that could make it happen, I think that ultimately that's what we should be aiming for, to ensure that we have to change the face of the city council should be our ultimate objective. The only benefit that we get from having so many Latinos running is making the call that we need representation. Thank you for that question.
Very well. I'll ask the question again, just for the audience who's just tuning in. There are 5 of you running for the DC Council that could potentially split the Latino vote and prevent any of you from being elected. Why should every other member of this panel drop out and support your candidacy to unite the Latino vote? Mr. Padre.
So I'm actually with Mario on this one. It's not a matter of all of us deciding that only one of us should continue to be a candidate. Take advantage of the fact that you can vote for 2 Latinos or Latinas can help to make it more likely that there would be a Latino or Latinx member of the council. You don't have to vote for that Democratic incumbent. What has he done for you? So this is really an opportunity for empowerment. So choose 2 Latinos. I'm the longest serving elected official, Latino elected official in Washington, D.C. I understand the government and how it works, and I have a vision for how to make government more responsive to all of our stakeholder communities, not just Latinos. So I want to stand up for GLBT, for African Americans, for Latinos, for the
Time.
entire
Thank you.
rainbow.
Time.
Thank you, Mr. Padro, and we'll continue with Ms. Palacio.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm a civil rights lawyer and I've been working in service to DC communities as a public servant for 30 years. So I'm not a politician. I've never run for office. This is completely new to me. And I was the first Latina to register to serve as a DC council candidate in the history of our city. I also have, a law degree, and I bring the experience of working with our legislation, of knowing what works and what doesn't work. And I've seen the city council pass bills that don't get funded. I've seen the city council pass bills that don't have real outcomes for our residents. I want to be able to craft excellent legislation that really serves us. For example, protecting Latinos based on their status as a non-citizen. We need more protections for immigrants and Latinos in our city. We need a voice at a table that can do that. We need a lawyer, we need a fighter, we need a champion. We need a mother, a parent, someone who understands how the systems work. And I welcome everyone to, again, vote for 2 candidates. I agree.
Time. Thank you.
Very well. And finally, Ms. Barragan.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm not going to be selfish and talk about how great I am. I'm actually going to say we are giving people choices. That is what we need. We are setting the path for other Latinas, brown Latinas like me, to run. That's what we need to be doing. I dedicate my campaign to Ed Potillo. To think that we are entitled to drop out, come on, that's crazy. You have 2 votes. Vote for all, put it on any of us. You're getting all the flavors of Latinos right here. They don't want us in power. That's the reality. That is the reality. So we need to show them, we need to show their discrimination. They have never wanted us in power. We immigrants are 20% of the population and we've never been in legislature. So we have to show them their discrimination. This is our chance. We need to tell them to represent us. Don't be selfish. Think about our future. That's what we need to be doing. And this organization is not even endorsing us. That is crazy. Like, it's ridiculous that we're being asked for that. I'm so sorry.
Time. Thank you. Time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And thank you to our audience on Facebook. They're asking questions. I believe we will have time for questions. I believe that's the case. And thank you for the questions. Thank you for sharing and on your wall and with your friends this important conversation. All right. So let's continue. Our conversation now will turn to climate change. We're all feeling the effect of climate change. The District of Columbia has made tremendous strides in promoting urban sustainability. What strategies would you support to A, continue our efforts to become carbon neutral, and B, promote green technology, innovation, and jobs? Mr. Garcia, we'll start with you.
Yes. Let me just conclude this conversation that we had before, just to ensure that we need to be strategic about this. That's what the bottom line is. So nobody's being selfish. We simply need to be strategic. I have no problem with folding my campaign and ensuring that the strongest Latina or Latino gets elected. That's what I've worked all my life in the city to ensure that we have adequate representation. So this is what this is about. It's not about being selfish. It's about who all has an opportunity to take on some of these other folks that are running so that we can ultimately change the trajectory of the city council that for nearly 50 years has denied us representation. We've had Latinos run in all positions to include the mayoral race. In terms of the environment, I actually think that we should need to continue to be a green city. The city has to reflect what it is, the nation's capital, the most powerful nation on earth, and we can't be behind. We need to be a leader in everything green. So I know my time is up, but just wanted to make sure that I support green.
Very well. And Mr. Padro, you're next.
One of the challenges that we face as a city is that we have a substantial amount of existing housing stock that is aging, that has captured a lot of carbon. And we're not providing incentives for property owners and developers to retrofit those buildings so that they can be more energy efficient, so that we don't have to tear down every old building in order to build a new one. in order to get the financing that's available from the district in order to create additional affordable housing. So one of the fastest ways that we can make progress towards our green goals is to come up with financial and tax incentives to be able to renovate and reuse existing multifamily housing in the district so that it can be more environmentally friendly and also expand our ability to use.
Thank you. Time.
Thank you. We're talking about the effects of climate change and what strategies will our candidates support to continue our efforts to become a carbon neutral city, and B, promote green technology, innovation, and jobs. And we'll continue with Ms. Palacio.
Yes, well, I love seeing a lot of these ambitious goals around solar energy and protecting, our watershed and protecting, cleaning up the Anacostia River. I think those are all very, very important goals. One of the things I'm most concerned about, however, is how development is pressing down on our infrastructure as a city, and the flooding that we've seen in Edgewater and different neighborhoods, even here in Tacoma, DC, where I am now. There's flooding because our water and sewage systems can no longer keep up with the mass development that the city has been through over the last 20 years. And who pays for that? Low-income families in communities where they can't fight back, they can't organize. So we need to make sure that we not only reduce our carbon footprint and continue to provide alternatives to mass transit. I believe in all of those goals, they're very important. But if we're going to prioritize the safety of Black and Brown families, I want to make sure everyone is safe in their home and we don't have families at risk.
Thank you. I was waiting for my dog to stop barking. We'll just continue. Mrs. Barragan, please continue.
Thank you. So in the comp plan, one of the fights that I had last year was trying to add the word climate equity in the framework element, and it was denied by the chairman. Those type of fights are really important for all of us. Now I'm going to start bragging about myself. So I have a master's in environmental policy. I think I'm the only one who does that, who has that background in this, out of all the 24 candidates. I am interested in a just transition process so that solar jobs, all of these other renewable jobs are going to our people, and not just Latinos, but also immigrants and also Black immigrants too. I want to make sure that you all realize I'm an urban planner. So I am showing our youth that you have other choices in professions. You don't have to be just lawyers. You can also do work in STEM. You can be doctors. You could be doing renewable energy work. You could be doing urban planning and architecture and really do sustainable work throughout. We have more choices, and that's what we need to be doing, and we need to fight those things. Next week, I'll be at DPW's.
Time. Thank you.
Very well. Mr. Cristaldo, you're next.
The District of Columbia is in the right direction in terms of helping our environment and also becoming having a better situation in terms of climate change. I believe that we need to enhance some of our policies, including, for example, we need to make sure that the DC government follows suit by itself. So make sure that the DC government actually becomes 100% energy renewable in terms of its usage, and also make sure that all the businesses with the District of Columbia and companies doing businesses in the District of Columbia also are required to follow the same policies. We need to be 100% renewable energy usage by 2030.
Time. Thank you. Time.
All right, very well, Mr. Cristaldo. Thank you so much. And our next question. Let me see if I'm still on. Am I still on?
Yes.
Okay, well, the district's chief financial officer, Jeffrey DeWitt, recently announced a budget shortfall of $782 million over the next 4 years. That means that serious cuts are probably coming soon. As a council member, what will you do to ensure that essential services are not cut for vulnerable community members, including Latinos? We'll start with Mr. Padro.
So first of all, on a budget of the size of ours, the council needs to do a much better job of oversight. There's a lot of duplication of services, especially in back office functions that could help to address some of our short-term needs. Some of the big projects that are on the books right now that aren't going anywhere could easily be sacrificed in the short term, such as the infrastructure for the McMillan redevelopment and the expansion of the DC streetcar. But most importantly, we need to sharpen our pencils and look for opportunities to make sure that, that there are excess costs that are not being spent duplicatively when we are in need, and making sure that the prioritization of essential services to our most vulnerable are at stake.
And next to answer that question is Ms. Palacio.
Yes, thank you. So as I said, I'm the only candidate that served under 2 mayors as a cabinet member and managed an agency budget in front of the city council and successfully protected my budget every time someone wanted to come and cut it. So saying that, I've been involved in the budget making process for the district for 6.5 years. And I know there are efficiencies that we can find inside the government to save costs and to pay for the services that our families and our communities need the most. So we need to increase efficiency. We need to make sure to cut all these vanity projects. I understand dog parks are important. I understand people want dog parks. I have a dog, but I also think that we have to prioritize healthcare, protecting workers, keeping families in their apartments, making sure that children can enroll in school and have computers and be connected to their learning. So I think that revenue can also come from creative sources like a mini bond financing program, which I've been talking about, which is used in Denver, Colorado.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Palacio. We'll continue with Mrs. Barragan.
Yeah. So I learned a lot from serving the Great Ward 8. As a research analyst there, I used evidence-based tools like data analysis, really looking at census data. Right now, we've been talking a lot about the census. So now it's time for us to use it. And we need to have people in there, Latinos, who can use those tools. I know how to use those tools. That's what I do for a living. So understanding what school enrollment is like, really advocating for LEP students, right? Because that's how we were able to get language access. The bill passed, and that's how OHR was able to get, double their staff, right? Because we did the work. But because of that, we did it because of data. We did that because we pushed these agencies to their limits in order to be able to listen to us. Because honestly, a lot of these agencies are not doing the work. And what they're gonna do is, yes, they are gonna cut us because they don't like us. They don't want us to live in the city. They discriminate Latinos. They discriminate immigrants. So we need more.
Thank you. Time.
Very well. And we'll close this round of answers with Mr. Cristaldo, then Mr. Garcia. Mr. Cristaldo.
Thank you. I think that one of the areas that we need to look into our budget is our rainy day fund. As a matter of fact, as we all know, the CFO has certified in early February $1.4 billion into our rainy day funds. So what's going on right now with all the economic crisis, all the health crisis going on? We are in a crisis situation where it's raining. It's not only raining, it's pouring raining right now. So this is the type of fund that we have set aside for this time. So I would be also looking into the rainy day fund to solve some of these issues that we're facing at this time.
Very well. We're talking about a budget shortfall of $782 million over the next 4 years. That means serious cuts are probably coming soon. As a council member, what will you do to ensure that essential services are not cut for vulnerable community members, including Latinos, will get Mr. Garcia's answer to that question now. Mr. Garcia.
Okay, yes. All news wasn't so bad from Mr. DeWitt. He actually said that we did in fiscal year 2020 a little better than we expected. But I would put, like I said earlier, all things on the table. First, we have to ensure that we put people back to work, because that'll generate additional revenue for us. We also, somebody has talked about us ensuring that we take advantage and leverage on that good credit rating that we have, and perhaps think about municipal bonds, the rainy day fund that Mario just mentioned. That's an opportunity also. I also think that we need to pursue that $750 million the federal government owe us. And thank God that the Speaker of the House is on our side. And she's actually, every time we put a new bill, she includes it there. Think about alternative ways also. How about internal tourism? We need to open up the economy. That's important. And so let's go ahead and promote. And I know that a lot of people aren't coming into our city right now. Let's promote internal tourism and ensure that we have a vibrant.
Time.
Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. And that concludes our prepared questions. We'll now take some questions from our audience as selected by Ms. Martinez. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to answer each question. And I think we are ready.
Okay, we have a lot of great questions from our audience. I am going to combine a few of them that touch on the same topics. But our first one comes from Kika on Facebook. She says, I identify as a proud Afro-Latina, and I pain when I see division between our gente. How do you propose bringing our people together? So I'm not sure if Mr. Negron, if you want to keep the list going.
We'll start with Mr. Padro.
Thanks. One of the
And you have 30 seconds.
One of the hallmarks of my plans to be able to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table is to actually create task forces and roundtables that would work with my staff and myself to make sure that there's representation. Because if you have a seat at the table, then you have the opportunity to be heard and your needs and hopefully be met. So inclusion, by representation would be the most important thing that I would do to make sure that everybody of every color gets to be around.
Ms. Palacio.
Well, I've spent 25 years working on the topic of racism. And as a Latina whose father was Afro-Colombian, but you can't tell by looking at me, it's important that we educate each other about the histories in our home countries. And I love the term Latino and Latina and Latinx because it gives us a chance to open up that conversation and share our stories, because no matter how different we are, we share so much as a Latino community that I believe can overcome any challenge.
Very well. Mrs. Barragan.
Yes, we need to focus on what we agree, and that's sadly sometimes very little, but we all want to be employed. And I often ask, like, how many jobs did I create? Like, that's my focus. How many jobs for Latinos am I creating? And I'm not going to make a distinction on race. In fact, I'm going to go for equity to make sure that those who have the least have more. We need to heal together. I think that's really important. Nobody here is talking about healing. And also, Latino and Latina and Latinx and all that is amazing. And we need to continue our identities.
Time.
Go back to our roots.
Time.
And we'll continue with Mr. Cristaldo.
Thank you. I'm actually very proud of being part of the DC Afro-Latino Caucus myself. I think, an organization like that is a great way of coming together in understanding, in conversations that has to do with the things that we're really going through. Is a way of doing it, creating the opportunities for all of us to discuss our issues together. So I think we're in the right direction.
Time.
And finally, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, thank you. And I think that Kika will appreciate the response here. I think that ultimately what we need to do is we need to find things that how we can work together. Look at ourselves as people that can actually provide different skill set. And so I think that bring music and music always brings people together. So whatever we have in common, let's go ahead and work with that and have our people all share in and use the strength of our collective community to ensure we get our things done.
Very well. We're taking questions from the audience. Ms. Martinez, who's next?
Okay, so we have two viewers, Tatiana and our board member, Joe, who are interested in a little bit more specifics about small businesses. So this question is, COVID-19 has devastated so many small businesses, many of whom employ Latinos. What is your plan, a little bit more specifically, to help these businesses and encourage them to return as the pandemic recedes?
As specific as you can get in 30 seconds, Ms. Palacio.
30 seconds. So I want to make sure that we can provide grants and loans to our small businesses, particularly those that are Black and Brown owned. And I think we can help them adapt, reinvent themselves, combine resources, share space, co-locate. I've seen a lot of creative techniques, companies that used to work, making t-shirts, making masks, or, providing services in one industry and now providing COVID sanitation and cleanup services. So we have to help our businesses survive.
Time. Thank you.
Well. And we'll continue with Ms. Barragan.
So I'm a business owner. So what I did is I started my own business and I started hiring people, and I plan on hiring more people and trying to go after more projects and doing it on my own, because what we really need are tangible resources. We need accountants, we need lawyers, we need marketing folks that are helping us. A lot of these things are, a lot of those DSLBD, all they're doing is teaching us, but they're not giving us resources. And that's what we need in order to empower ourselves.
Very well. Mr. Cristaldo.
Yeah, I think we need to help our small business owners, giving them opportunities for more assistance at this time, like the PPE, the program that helps them stay afloat in this very difficult times. These are a way of helping the federal government. We need to actually go back and try to get the money that they owe us,
Time.
$500 million.
Thank you. Time.
Very important for our small business.
Time.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Cristaldo, and we'll continue with Mr. Garcia.
Yes, and as it's been said already, we need to ensure that we have enough grants and short-term loans. I know that banks, we need to partner with banks like United Bank and City First, who have done an incredible job to ensuring that the small business community has that money available. Transportation is key. We need to ensure that employees don't spend all their monies on Uber, that we actually subsidize their expenses. And of course, we need to be creative. We need to ensure that we promote internal tourism and do what we can to ensure that the vibrancy of our economy continues.
Time.
Very well. And Mr. Padro.
Commercial property taxes are one of the biggest expenses that all of our small businesses continue to have to face, even though they can only occupy 30 or 50% of the space that they lease or that they own. They have to pay 100% of the property taxes. I'm proposing that the property taxes be capped by the same percentage as the health restrictions restricting how much space can be used. That would be the number one proposal.
Very well. We're taking questions from the audience. Thank you so much for watching on Facebook or wherever else you may be watching this program. If you have any question, please send it in. Ms. Martinez, what's our next question?
Okay, so we know as council members, you're going to have a lot of competing priorities with a lot of groups. So Jose wants to know, our LGBTQ community in Washington, D.C. is one of the most progressive. However, the budget for many organizations are very limited. How can you help increase the city budget to help our LGBTQ community?
And we'll start this round with Ms. Barragan.
Yes. So I participated in the budget process. I learned so much again from Ward 8 and just doing the work for the Committee on Recreation, for example. So we can actually start putting in a lot of funding for LGBTQ in all of these specific public services needs, right? Because LGBT communities have needs in every single possible way. So we need to start doing that. Recreation centers, like we need to start including, actually we had an idea. Let's have a multicultural center, and part of that funding for that should go for LGBTQ Latinos and immigrants.
Time.
We can do
Thank
that
you.
throughout.
Time.
Thank you, Ms. Barragan, and we'll continue with Mr. Cristaldo. You're next.
Thank you. I think it's very important that we strengthen our community-based organization providing services to our LGBTQ plus community, including in the issue of housing. Is one area that we need to be most focused on. Also, preventing violent crime against LGBTQ plus community is something that
Time.
we need to.
Thank you.
Get,
Time.
get
Thank you.
well. Thank you.
Time.
And we'll continue with Mr. Franklin Garcia. Mr. Garcia.
Yes, and so what we need to do is to ensure that the funding is available, as we mentioned earlier, and how we're going to get to that funding. And then once we have that funding, then we become champions for those communities. And I agree, like Mario said, we need to ensure that all those nonprofits that are providing critical services to the LGBT community are well funded. And that's ultimately what we need to do. We need to find champions that once you get the funding on the city council, have a champion for oppressed communities like the LGBT community, and I intend on being that.
Very well. And Mr. Padro.
I've actually proposed that the district government create a new building or complex that would incorporate offices for the mayor's office for LGBT affairs, the Center for LGBT, the private nonprofit that would also provide housing, both transitional housing and emergency housing for LGBTQ homeless youth, as well as LGBTQ seniors. And also
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Padro. And we'll close this round with Ms. Palacio.
Yes, thank you. So while I was director of the Office of Human Rights, I worked closely with LGBT advocates, first addressing homophobia and discrimination against transgender women of color. And our agency was one of the first to help transgender women of color fight discrimination in the workplace. But I think that we have to stop passing bills on the council that are not funded, like the Language Access Act, by the way, which was never actually funded, and fund bills to support LGBTQ organizations and causes.
Thank you so much. And we're going to continue with our audience questions. We actually like this segment very much. We love that you're watching, that you're sharing, that you're participating in the conversation. Ms. Martinez, who's next?
Okay, this one is about mass transit. And we know that a lot of Latinos are essential workers, frontline workers. And so this issue is very important to our community. But mass transit has been severely impacted by COVID-19. And WMATA has had a long history of financial problems. Many members of our community need mass transit to get to work. What would you do to support it as a council member?
Mr. Cristaldo, we'll start with you.
I live on 16th Street in Northwest DC, and the S2 and the S4 are loaded of Latinos and Latino immigrants and other members of the immigrant community going to work to downtown at different times, up to 10 p.m. in the evenings. And those guys, they need transportation, and transportation should be free for DC workers. So I would agree with some of the measures in the council.
Time.
Mr. Cristaldo, thank you. And Mr. Garcia, you're next.
Yes, and so transportation is key. And so what I would propose is, just like we currently have programs, for example, children who attend public school, they don't pay our metro system, and seniors have discounts. I would propose that anybody who makes minimum wage should get some type of subsidy to ride metro. It is important that we ensure that we have a robust system that works for everybody. Low income earners are not able to afford it right now.
Very well. Mr. Garcia, thank you. And Mr. Padro, we'll continue with you.
We're unable to tax income at its source for all of those Maryland, Virginia, and residents of other states that come into town every day and then leave at the end of the day. So there's a concept known as congestion pricing, where cars that I would recommend that are not DC tagged cars that come into the city actually would be automatically charged a surcharge or a tax, especially based on the time of they're doing that. That could be funded, used to fund enhancements on transit.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll continue with Ms. Palacio.
I agree that we need to offer mass transit discounts for our essential workers, which tend to be Latino workers and hourly wage workers. So we need to figure out ways to improve transportation and free transportation, free circulator buses, for example, during certain routes at night. A lot of our community members have to work, late into the night, work many jobs in order to pay their bills. So why don't we figure out how to provide free transportation during certain hours and subsidized transportation during regular hours?
Very well. And Ms. Barragan will have the last word on this topic. Ms. Barragan.
Yes. So recently, Trump lifted the Title VI equity analysis process that all transit agencies have to follow. So what we're going to start seeing because of that, and DDOT loved it. They started using it like there's no tomorrow. So what we're going to start seeing our communities being punished more. 48% of all immigrant families do not drive. I was the only one who was there at the fare evasion hearing bill and provided testimony and support, because what we do is people tell us that we don't pay our fares. So we need to start with that, because that's where we need to fight for our own people, and none of these candidates were at the hearing.
Very well. And we have time for one more audience question. Ms. Martinez, what's the question?
Okay, so this is a great one. It's about statehood, which we know impacts how we protect our immigrant community, criminal justice, everything. And Barbara actually has this question. She makes a great point at the end. She says, if elected, what will you do to advance DC becoming the 51st state? When that happens, our state legislator will have more positions than our current council, more chances for Latinos to get elected. So how will you advance DC becoming the 51st state?
Great question indeed. And we'll start with Mr. Franklin Garcia.
Thank you so much. And as you know, I am the shadow member of Congress. When I got into Congress, I made sure that Latinos, members of the House of Representatives, supported statehood. This is an issue that they weren't very familiar with. By the end of my first Congress, I made sure that over 30% of the Latinos that weren't supporting statehood were on board. Today, we have more than 85% of all Latinos on board for our DC statehood. And a lot of it is because of the work I did. Just like Congresswoman Norton does for the Congressional Black Caucus, I have done it for the Hispanic Congressional Caucus. Thank you for that question.
Very well. Mr. Padro.
I've taken the oath of office to support, defend the Constitution of the United States, 10 times as an ANC commissioner. Every time I did that, I couldn't help but to think of all of the men and women from the District of Columbia that never got the chance to have representation in Congress, but gave their lives defending our country, for example, and paying taxes. So the game changer is statehood. So everything that can possibly be done to support this effort, which may possibly happen in a Biden-Harris administration, needs to be done.
Very well. Mr. Palacio, or Ms. Palacio, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So I think statehood is the key. I've been working on statehood for many years. If you go to my website, monicafordc.com, I have a TEDx talk where I actually talked about the importance of statehood and how the denial of statehood is really a legacy of racism in our country. But I think we can solve many of our problems. The fact that Latinos are hunted down by ICE officers, will finally have a vote on immigration policy. The fact that we were denied federal relief funds, will finally have a vote in making sure the district isn't cheated out of federal relief funds, and many more.
Very well. And thank you for keeping the 30 seconds. And that concludes our audience. Oh, well, hold on. I'm sorry. Well, so sorry, Ms. Barragan will not allow me to continue without her speaking on this. Of course, Ms. Barragan, go ahead.
Muchísimas gracias. So I walk in the path of my elders. Hector Rodriguez will remember that I actually, in 2016, I fought the chairman to keep and have more seats at the table, and he fought me against it. He's not going to do it. So we need to continue fighting, Ms. Barragan, because the chairman doesn't want us to have more seats. And thanks to Franklin, because I was on the streets while people were talking in TED Talks. I was actually next to him, walking on the streets, fighting for statehood. And that's what we need to continue doing. Gracias, Franklin, for all your work.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Barragan, and Mr. Cristaldo. I'm sure you want to answer this as well. Go ahead.
I'm very excited about the opportunity that we have as a district resident to become a state at this time. Our representatives have done a great job in pushing the issue internally, and then I think the strategy that has been used at this time is the right way to do it. We need to change the Senate, and if we do that in this election for the Democratic Party, I think we can get finally what we really want for all of us want here. DC. Thank you.
Mr. Cristaldo, thank you so much. And thank you all and all of our audience members for their questions. Great questions, indeed. All right, so let's continue. Now we're going to go to our closing statements segment of the program. Each candidate will get 2 minutes. And if our timekeeper is ready, we'll begin with Ms. Barragan.
Sorry, really quick, because I know she's going to come in. Please vote for Claudia Barragan, Claudia for DC. I want to make sure that we are all represented. That is one of the biggest things here, right? And that we are united eventually, because I don't think right now we are united as a whole. I want to make sure that there's equity, and then there's diversity in council, and then the people who are in there are actually going to show work, and that they've done work and they're going to do work in the future. So please, Claudia for DC. You can find out a lot more about me. My resume is in there. I think that's really important, because if you don't see if someone doesn't give you a resume, you're not really seeing what they actually did, right? So this is, to me, a really important job, and I take this seriously, and I'm ready for it. I've been getting ready for it, and I think I can represent you very well. I'm a fighter, and I've proven my work, and I have at least 28 bills that have already passed, and 6 that are waiting to pass. So I'm ready. As soon as I get in there, I'll start working for you. I've proven it. Y quiero también que hablemos en español. Por favor, algún día tenemos que tener acceso lingüístico para todos y tiene que ser en español. Voten por Claudia, por favor. Boliviana, Aymara, let's go back to our roots. Number 11 on the ballot. Gracias.
All right, very well. Y bueno, le quedaban unos 40 segundos a la señora Barragán. No sé si los quiere utilizar o si podemos continuar. Muy bien, continuaremos entonces y estamos en el round de las últimos comentarios, closing statements from our candidates, and we'll continue. Let me go back to my schedule. That was Ms. Barragan. We'll continue with Mr. Cristaldo.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank all the organizers and DC Latino Caucus for giving us the at-large candidates the opportunity to speak up about the issues, to discuss the issues, empower ourselves overall. The great majority of DC residents would like to get the same benefits that we see and experience in Northwest DC, in downtown, in the upper part of the city. Unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. But in spite of all of that, we have this collective vision in Washington, DC, and among Latinos that the District of Columbia is a world-class city that is livable, that is walkable, and that is affordable for all of us. So because of all of that, and because my commitment and my activism on behalf of the DC resident for more than 20 years, I'm running for DC City Council at large at this time, and I'm asking for your support and your vote. So you can get more information about what I do and what I have doing and what I've done in the District of Columbia in my website, www.mario2020dc.com. And you can see there all the things that I've done. Also, you can Google me and you'll find some of the great things that I've done in the community and that has been actually, that is out there. So, but the most important thing is that you have the opportunity to vote for 2 Latinos at this time. So, and I'm asking for one of those votes for Mario Cristaldo at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mario Cristaldo, and we'll continue with Mr. Franklin Garcia. Franklin.
Thank you very much. And so I am excited to be here, and thank you so much for putting this together. And, you know, you have an opportunity to change the trajectory of our representation in our city. And just like I go to Congress and I advocate for the inclusion of our city as the 51st state, because we don't have adequate representation, this is exactly what we're saying here. Now, you see that you have at least 5 well-qualified Latinos running. In Washington, this is what you need to understand. You have a lot of qualified candidates. That is true. But no one person is going to be able to take on all the issues, not even one issue by themselves. They all have to work together with others. And every one of us is competent enough to do that. We are asking that you consider one of us and that you send us to the DC Council, because we can see, look, back in the 80s, we had a lot more Latinos in our city. They went away because they didn't have adequate representation and their needs weren't addressed. We have a city that employs over 30,000 people. We can't find even 3% of that workforce be Latino, over 300 commissioners. If we find 15 in our city, that's a lot. We talk about the issues in policing. You know, we need to have a lot more police officers in the city. If we had a sitting council member, I think that would change. In housing, when we talk about affordable housing, that we have a crisis in the city, you know that our community doesn't even know a lot about those programs. I became a homeowner back in the 90s and ended up buying a bunch of properties, and I'm a landlord today because I was able to benefit from programs like the first-time home buyer, the homestead program, tax abatement. Most of our communities do not even know these things. And so we're advocating for the least among us. So I am asking you to please consider changing something that we need to change today, the city council. Thank you for voting for me.
Very, very well, Mr. Franklin Garcia. And we'll continue with Mr. Padro.
So obviously, over the past decades, when we have not had a Latino member of the council, we've had allies, but it's not the same. It's not the same as having one of your own with a seat at the table, because no one is going to fight for you the way that one of your own does. And that's why it's important that we do everything that we can to get a Latino member of the council for the District of Columbia elected in this cycle. We've never had this many candidates, come forward. We also haven't had this many candidates, competing for one seat. But remember, again, you can vote for 2 and take advantage of the opportunity and vote for 2 Latino candidates. As I mentioned before, I have the most experience of all of the candidates that are running in terms of being an elected official in the District of Columbia. At 20 years, I'm the most experienced Latino elected official in the city. I've managed a nonprofit organization that's helped to create jobs across our city. I've also helped to create opportunities for artists. I've been involved in creating affordable housing. I've been involved in fighting for our libraries. Our new MLK library, we wouldn't have it if I hadn't fought to keep it instead of having it torn down and disposed of. Historic preservation, there are landmarks all over the city that I've been responsible for helping to save, working with people in different communities in our city. So that's what I'm offering to do. I'm offering to work with the residents of every community in our city, every neighborhood in our city, to help to come up with a vision for the improvements that you want to see happen in a way that can be done without displacing long-time, low and moderate income people of color in the process. So finding the resources to make that revitalization happen for every neighborhood would be my goal. Go to alexpadro.com.
Thank you, time.
Mr. Alex Padro, thank you so much. And finally, Ms. Palacio, Monica Palacio.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. And thank you to everyone. Thank you to the DC Latino Caucus for organizing this. It takes quite a bit of work. And I just want to say that, for many years, I planned and hoped and had a vision of running for the DC Council. And I had to leave my job earlier this year in January to be able to do this. As I was setting up my campaign in February, setting up a website, talking to people, getting excited, printing material, I had no idea the world would shut down just a few weeks later in the middle of March. And I made a decision then, and I have held this decision all year, that it's so important for us to have a voice. It was so important for us to have a Latina fighting to win a seat on the council that I didn't give up. And I've been persisting. I qualified for the Fair Elections program this year, which means that every contribution made by a DC resident is matched 5-to-1. I'm not taking contributions from companies or special interests or PACs, and I don't have a lot of fancy endorsements. I think not only are we running against each other, but we're running against a slate of 19 other candidates, many of whom carry a lot of white privilege, white middle class privilege, and something that in our communities, we have to constantly fight against. You know, I grew up poor in New York City, and one of the reasons I've dedicated my life to public service is because my mother was a New York City nurse, and she was one of the first nurses that spoke Spanish and was able to help families communicate with their doctors. So I'm sharing this with you because we need someone who can fight across every part of the city, have a seat at every table, be part of every conversation, and be a champion for Latinos and a champion for immigrants. So I hope that I can win your vote between now and November, because people have already started voting. It's important that you are informed. Check out my website, Monica for DC, and stay safe. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of our candidates, our audience, our members, the organizers, and thank you for inviting me. Ahora en español, ha sido un verdadero placer tenerlos a todos ustedes y la audiencia también. Como latino muy orgulloso de quien soy, me enorgullece realmente saber que hay 5 latinos corriendo al mismo tiempo. Y creo que la idea de que podemos escoger 2 es maravilloso. Aquí tienen 5 maravillosas personas. Espero que salgan a votar. Cualquier otra cosa que no hagan, salgan a votar, por favor. Regístrense para votar para que por lo menos nos cuenten y se den cuenta de que sin nosotros no pueden ganar. Así es que respetan a otras comunidades y así es que van a respetar la nuestra. Así que por favor salgan a votar. Gabriela Mossi is going to take back the reins of this conversation to close off this great event. Thank you, Gabriela, for inviting me. And you know you can count on me on anything else you guys may need in the future.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. This has been wonderful. We're so grateful for your time. I want to thank the 5 candidates, colleagues. I work with many of you, and you've done great things for our community. So we're very proud of you. So again, thanks for your commitment. We wish you the best of luck on your campaigns and success. And I think Alejandro had said it. I need to remind everybody, we all need to remind you to go out and vote. And so what I'm going to add is that you need to take with you la abuela, la prima, el primo, la tía, perico de los palotes, folks, whoever, okay? That is the message today. I know you are all engaged and you will all vote, but you have to take somebody else. And if they are in a state outside of DC, because we're not a state yet, even better, please call them, take them, inform them, help them out. They need to go vote. So that is our big message for all of you, is that, please do take at least one other person to the ballot box this November. And please look out in the mail, because DC Board of Elections is mailing ballots to you. It's very easy and it's going to be safe. So many of you have received it. If you have not, then please contact the DC Board of Elections, or you can vote early and you can vote safely at many centers, including even the Nationals Park, if you choose to do that. And so again, thank you very much for making your voices heard. Now we need you as individuals to make your voice heard here in this country and in our local elections. I hope you found it informative. And buenas noches. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks.
Buenas noches y gracias.
Gracias.
Bye. Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Buenas noches.